Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, August 31st, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy set to challenge GOP Senator Lisa Murkowski not in the 2026 midterm elections, but in the 2028 Senate races, going to Fox News and telling and indicating that he is going to be running for Senate after his term as governor and run in 2028 as a Republican challenger against the GOP senator who's been serving in this position since 2002. This decision from the Alaska governor comes at a time that there's a lot of speculation around former Representative Mary Peltola running for Senate in the 2026 cycle. Mary Peltola right now, who is the most popular Alaska politician, has been floating the idea of running for Senate, and it looks like that this GOP governor, Mike Dunleavy, who's been in office for a little bit period of time, is looking like he wants to run in 2028. Putting his name out there, making major headwaves, because he is going to be the right-wing challenger to Lisa Murkowski, who right now is not all that popular. And there's a problem here for Lisa Murkowski in 2028 that someone this early on is already speculating that they will run against her in the 2028 cycle. There isn't even a Wikipedia page for the Senate race because it is that far away. Now, Lisa Murkowski seems like she intends to run for re-election, and she's faced close and competitive races, even against members of her own party before. But it looks like 2028 might be pretty different. Back in 2022, Lisa Murkowski faced a pretty notable opponent in Kelly Tshibaka, who was endorsed by Donald Trump in the 2022 cycle to go against Lisa Murkowski. But Lisa Murkowski was saved by what Alaska has and implements across the state as ranked choice voting, essentially allowing voters in states, in a state like Alaska, to rank a multitude of candidates over other candidates that by the time you reach an eventual round, maybe your first choice candidate didn't make it to the top two, but your vote still counts as much as someone who ranked, one of these other candidates as their first choice. And so in 2022, she actually did see that in the first round, she was leading by roughly about a point. Pat Chesbro was the Democratic nominee for Alaska, or one of the Democratic candidates here, because there is no party primary system in Alaska. But the point is that that Democrat was eliminated in the first round. And Lisa Murkowski, being this, more of a maverick-style senator who's more bipartisan, received about 70 to 80% of the Democratic Party's vote share in this state, which skyrocketed her 10 points across the state and won her re-election in 2022. But it was an interesting showing because Kelly Tshibaka, who had been endorsed by Donald Trump, had stood to be pretty much the MAGA candidate in the state of Alaska. Donald Trump, who won Alaska in 2016 by 14 points, then in 2020 by 10 points, then in 2024 by 13 points, certainly is a highly regarded politician in the state, even if you do have candidates coming out of it, like Mary Peltola and some other Democrats, who believe that 2026 might be their time in the state of Alaska. But it goes to show that the Republican Party in Alaska is largely in disarray. The fact remains that an incumbent Republican governor floating 3 years out, that they will be challenging the Republican incumbent in the Alaska Senate race, really goes to show you exactly how dire of a position Lisa Murkowski is in, and not to mention just the lack of coordination on this point. Murkowski has filed to run for re-election, but incumbents always do that. That doesn't mean that she is actually going to run, and she's actually recently floated the idea that she would run for governor in 2026. Now, she's had a very interesting pathway to electoral politics. In 2002, she was appointed by her father, who was governor of the state of Alaska. She had a very competitive race in 2004, won by about 3 points. Then in 2010, she actually lost the GOP primary. She lost to Joe Miller. Joe Miller had received a lot of endorsements from a number of other people across the country. Liz Cheney, Todd Palin, John Cornyn, right? Jim Inhofe, notable names. And at the time, Sarah Palin had made an endorsement for Joe Miller. Mike Huckabee had made an endorsement because she was not, super conservative at the time. She was a Republican, don't get that wrong. But again, she was more bipartisan. She had received some support from Democrats across the state. And also, too, as someone who had been entrenched in this state's politics for about 6 years, had been able to build out a rapport with a lot of these candidates here. Lisa Murkowski, who was supposed to really do well in the primary, lost the primary to Joe Miller across the state. But rather than not run in 2010 as the incumbent, she said, you know what? I'm going to run a write-in campaign. Democrats thought this might be an opening, that it might be an opportunity here, but we knew Lisa Murkowski or Joe Miller were more likely than not going to be the senators from the state. And by the time you got closer to the election, Lisa Murkowski really built up that name ID, had built up the way that voters liked her. And by the time you reached the 2010 election, got about 101,000 votes as a write-in candidate and won her race. In 2016, she won in a multi-way race against Joe Miller, that same candidate from 2010, who this time ran as a libertarian, ran against an independent, ran against a Democrat. Lisa Murkowski underperformed, and then in 2022 ran against a MAGA candidate, and now in 2028 is set to have probably one of her most challenging races, this time against the incumbent Alaska governor. And so I think it is really interesting that, one, we're already starting to see Republicans really cannibalize themselves in the state of Alaska, especially with all this conversation around whether or not Mary Peltola will run. Only 4 people of the recent survey here have found themselves to be more popular than unpopular in the state of Alaska. And of those with high name ID across the state, 2 in particular stand out to me. President Donald Trump has a positive approval rating in Alaska, 50-49, and Mary Peltola, 52-43, a net 9-point approval across the state. Dan Sullivan, the Republican senator set to go up against potentially Mary Peltola in 2026, is net 0, and Mike Dunleavy is down 7. But the problem for Murkowski is that Republicans see an opening here to replace her with an even more conservative and Republican voting senator from this state that routinely votes for Republicans on the national level. Democrats haven't won Alaska in decades on the presidential level, and Lisa Murkowski's approval rating really has faltered in the past year. When you take a look at the numbers of what her race looks like, if we can go ahead and find, not this survey, I believe this is the front runner for Alaska governor races, but in 2024, Mary Peltola was the most popular candidate in the state. But Lisa Murkowski had about +2 across the state, and it was primarily Republicans who disapproved of her, which is why she didn't get a lot of the Republican vote in 2022. But now, because of her votes on things like the Big Beautiful Bill and passing forth key pieces of legislation through Donald Trump, voting in confirmation for a number of different Trump appointees in the state, ultimately, she has fallen far from grace in the state, now a net -23 across Alaska. And that's abysmal. I mean, that is a huge and catastrophic fall off, a 25-point negative shift in about a year in a state that has a very small population. I mean, voters are really souring on you if that's the way you are seeing the whiplash go in this state. It's not a great position to be in. She's primarily being held up by some Democrats who are open to this idea of her being more of an independent. The Republican Party really doesn't like her. A lot of core Democrats, too, really don't like her anymore after these recent votes. And so she has fallen from grace in a very dramatic way, and certainly in one that opens her up for vulnerabilities. And the Republican Party is pouncing on it. And historically speaking, you hadn't really found that the incumbent political party would be actively trying to kick out a member of their own. It happens on occasion. It happens at different periods of time. But this is to a whole nother degree. Because Lisa Murkowski has shown that she is able to build out a pretty expensive coalition. And if we're being real and honest about the case, as much as she might be someone who votes with the Democrats a few times, her votes have never really made much of a consequence because she passed the Big Beautiful Bill. Her votes against some of the Trump confirmations did not end up going to a tie with J.D. Vance. I mean, ultimately speaking, a lot of this is just her yapping. It is really just her saying that she doesn't like the bill and that she hopes the House sends it back. But obviously everyone knew that wasn't going to be the case. And ultimately, I think, has found herself where she is not pleasing anybody. No Democrats, no Republicans, and that puts her in a tremendously difficult position. And I do think it is rare for a candidate of this caliber who's actually been in elected office forever. I mean, since I was born in 2002, forever. And to think about the fact that she is now coming up against an incumbent Republican governor of her own state who's saying 3 years in advance. It's not even like this is a split ticket decision where Donald Trump is calling in a favor. No, this is a premeditated, I want you out so bad, I'm willing to say it to your face 3 years in advance that I'm running against you. And it will be interesting to see. And so taking a look at where we are, taking a look at Alaska, broad strokes, the Republicans are turning on themselves. And Lisa Murkowski, who might have been this candidate who had the juice before, simply does not have it today. And as she has really angered much of her base that got her elected in 2022, and that actually being a very liberal-leaning base, it looks like in 2028, her time might be up, and it won't be a Democrat who takes her down, but rather her own governor, who's a member of her political party who's saying 3 years in advance, I don't want you in office so badly. I'm going to announce this challenge today, and I'm going to beat you in 2028. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.